Hello and welcome to another edition of Well Buddy, coming to you from West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Coming up in this edition.
I used to have fever attacks, and for weeks I could not do anything, not even take care of my family. One man used a razor blade. He made cuts in my leg, then used the suction device. He told me he had removed something, but if he took something out, why was the leg getting bigger and bigger?
Okay, so elephantiasis is a very chronic debilitating disease that usually involves the limbs and also sometimes can involve the scrotal area in men and the breast in women. And it's called elephantiasis because the leg becomes grossly enlarged, swollen and big, and looks like the leg of an elephant.
In the program, we shift our focus to a neglected tropical disease, lymphatic filariasis or elephantiasis. Stay tuned for more details. Thank you everyone for joining us, and special thanks to our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County, in Ghana Royals FM 14.7 and of course our latest edition Pod FM 91.1 Savannah region. We also welcome our listeners on Al Baraka Radio 97.5 FM Bauchi in Nigeria. This is Well Buddy, your magazine program that brings to the fore health issues in the sub-region, developments across the board and personal health matters that will allow you to make informed decisions about your health. I am Imo Edet, your anchor. Well, are you familiar with the name lymphatic filariasis, which is also known as elephantiasis? Have you seen people with a swollen leg either moving with discomfort or immovable? These people have a disease common in tropical regions with a high breed of mosquitoes called elephantiasis. The unfortunate thing about this disease is not just that it is caused by parasitic worms, it is highly infectious, spreading from person to person through mosquitoes. In sub-Saharan Africa, about 512 million people are at risk of being infected, while 28 million are known to be infected. Although the mortality from lymphatic filariasis is low, the disease is a fourth leading cause of disability-adjusted life years. For example, in the Upper East region of Ghana, the prevalence of hydrocele was 30.8% and elephantiasis of the leg was 3.8% in the population aged 10 years and above. Studies also showed that 12% of extended families reported having at least one family member with elephantiasis of the leg. Nigeria is ranked the third most endemic country globally. Lymphatic filariasis remains a public health problem in the country, being endemic in 583 of the 774 local government areas. That's about 75.3%. However, the country's Ministry of Health, with partners like the Carter Center, making efforts to eradicate lymphatic filariasis. Elephantiasis, as it is also known, causes swelling of the scrotum, legs or breasts. Well, let's pause at this point and take a report from Usman Omar in Abuja.
Rahab Joshua runs a small business in Plateau State, Nigeria, selling rice and ground maize at the local market. She can be described as someone with a great smile and has 6 bright children, a supportive husband, and she has lymphatic filariasis or elephantiasis.
I used to have fever attacks, and for weeks I could not do anything, not even take care of my family.
Rahab noticed the symptoms of lymphatic filariasis or elephantiasis when she had her 4th child, and the progressive swelling of her legs sent her on a desperate search for treatment. The journey for relief brought none and depleted her family's finances.
One man used a razor blade. He made cuts in my leg, then used the suction device. He told me he had removed something, but if he took something out, why was the leg getting bigger and bigger?
Rahab's husband, Joshua, lamented that at times they barely had enough money for food because they spent so much looking for cures. As Rahab's deformity grew, her cycle of friends shrank.
Someone gave me new clothes to pass on to another woman, but she refused to collect them because they came through me. During that time, I cried a lot.
Sometimes I even pray that let God take her alive because she is suffering too much, and even the pain in my heart is too much on me.
All this pain begins with a bite from infected mosquitoes. As the disease advances, it wreaks havoc on the lymphatic system, causing enormous swellings, and the damage can't be undone. John Umaru is with the Carter Center, Nigeria.
The deformity that has already happened will ever be there.
But new cases can be prevented. International organizations such as the Carter Center, working with Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Health and other partners, have stopped the transmission of elephantiasis and the two states of Plateau and Nasarawa through health education and treatment.
You can do the washing right in between the toes.
She wholeheartedly accepted the advice and started practicing it.
It is more than 5 years now that she's ever had a serious acute infection.
And to help her go through this, Rehab joined a group called Hope.
You can't imagine how happy I am that my children and grandchildren will never have to go through this. I've tried to support other women with the disease. I talk with them and encourage them to attend the group meeting.
As elephantiasis stops spreading, Rehab makes sure the message of hope continues to expand, especially among the survivors of the disease.
That was Usman Umar in Abuja with our report. Let's now bring in our expert, as we're being joined by Dr. Fumilayo Cole Adeife. She is a consultant dermatologist and venerologist at the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, Lagos, Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Please, can you just break down what this disease is all about?
Okay, so elephantiasis is a very chronic debilitating disease that usually involves the limbs and also sometimes can involve the scrotal area in men and the breast in women. And it's called elephantiasis because the leg becomes grossly enlarged, swollen and big, and, looks like the leg of an elephant. So that is actually why it has that name. It's commonly caused by a condition called lymphatic filariasis, which is a known neglected tropical disease. Lymphatic filariasis is a disease that, is caused by parasites or worms blocking the lymphatic vessels in the body, usually in the limbs, like I said, or the scrotum or the breast. And lymphatic filariasis is the commonest cause of elephantiasis, although there are other known causes. Now, this infection or infestation is passed by mosquitoes. The mosquitoes are the vectors. So the mosquito will bite an infected person, and then that mosquito with the infected blood can bite another person and transmit these filarial worms or parasites to another person. So very similar to how malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes.
Oh, so which means
lymphatic.
Yeah, doc. So which means somebody who doesn't even have any symptoms of this, but once he or she gets bitten by an infected mosquito, can actually have elephantiasis.
Well, yes. So what we have observed is that most people will have asymptomatic lymphatic filariasis, meaning that they may have the worm or the parasite, the filarial worm that causes elephantiasis or lymphatic filariasis in their blood, but they may not have any symptoms. However, these people can pass the filariasis on to other people. So it's not everyone who has this lymphatic filariasis that will go on to develop elephantiasis or lymphedema, which is what results in the so-called elephantiasis. So it is a vector-driven disease, and it can be passed from person to person via mosquitoes.
So in other words, we can say that elephantiasis is a communicable disease.
Right, that's correct.
Well, so what are these other causes pathologically, and what are the signs? Are they signs when someone? What are the symptoms? Let me put it that way.
So usually when a person is infected by a mosquito with the filarial worms or the microfilarial worms, they usually do not have any symptoms. But those worms can live for a long period of time in the blood, for up to 8 years. They can actually live in the blood and begin to reproduce. The adult worms tend to live in the lymph vessels or the lymphatic vessels. And it's when they begin to grow very large in the lymphatic vessels that they cause blockage. And the blockage is what results in the swelling of the limbs or the affected areas. And over time, this swelling becomes permanent and irreversible. So those are usually the symptoms. So to a large extent, a lot of people would remain asymptomatic until the worms begin to grow large enough to cause obstruction in the lymphatic vessels. More people may experience, non-specific symptoms, maybe like itching, but it's not very common with lymphatic filariasis. And in some cases, it can affect the kidneys. So in some cases, the microfilarial worms can cause some kidney damage as well. So the symptoms usually, that's one thing about this condition. It often goes asymptomatic until the leg swelling or tissue swelling begins.
But a lot of people also will be wondering why this has to do with genitals. I mean, you mentioned breast, you mentioned the scrotum, the arms, and other areas. What's the concern? What's the business of elephantiasis with the genitals?
Because of the lymphatic vessels. There are lymphatic vessels in all these areas of the body. And usually the genitals and the breasts there's no flow. So it's like an end organ, So once the lymph fluid gets stuck or blocked there, it can't come back. Unlike other parts of the body where maybe they may find the lymph fluid may find somewhere else to pass through. So the genitalia can be affected in men, particularly the scrotum, and in women, the breasts can be affected.
Does this at any point for the women lead to breast cancer?
Well, no, there hasn't been any association with breast cancer so far.
Well, how prevalent is elephantiasis in, let's start with Nigeria where you are.
So in Nigeria, elephantiasis is quite endemic. There's a lot of effort going on to reduce the prevalence of elephantiasis in Nigeria. It's Nigeria is one of the countries in which there's a very high percentage or a high prevalence of elephantiasis, but there's a lot of effort and work being done, and the cases or numbers are actually dropping.
What are the other risk factors for elephantiasis?
So for people who live in endemic areas, yes, then of course, an area where there are lots of mosquitoes, so swampy areas where there's a lot of stagnant water, where the vector mosquitoes can reproduce or multiply. All these are possible risk factors for elephantiasis.
Well, how is this elephantiasis diagnosed and eventually treated?
So the diagnosis can be made through the blood analysis. The blood sample of the person is taken and checked for the microfilarial worms. And in many cases, the microfilarial worms can be detected in the bloodstream. There are also other tests, what we call immunological tests, that can be done to pick out the elephantiasis. And there are also some immunological tests or ELISA tests that can be done to detect the elephantiasis antigens, or antibodies to the elephantiasis filarial worms in the blood. So that's usually how it is diagnosed. Of course, once the clinical symptoms are present, you want to confirm that it's actually lymphatic filariasis by doing this test, because there may be other causes of elephantiasis that are not caused by lymphatic filariasis. We could have things like podoconiosis, and also a condition called hereditary hereditary lymphangitis or Milroy's disease. So one needs to exclude an infectious cause of lymphatic filariasis by doing the blood tests.
We know that some West African countries, such as Togo, have eradicated this disease. What are the efforts is the government of Nigeria doing to ensure that this tropical disease is eradicated?
Well, to eradicate the disease, there has to be a lot of effort of tracing, surveillance of elephantiasis or lymphatic filariasis. And in communities or areas that are endemic, where you have a high prevalence of the disease, you want to have what we call mass drug administration. So there can be prevention, chemo prevention using mass drug administration, which involves, the distribution of medications to everyone in the community, whether or not they have symptoms of elephantiasis. And this is done so that those who may still be incubating it and have not been tested can be treated. And this tends to help eliminate eliminate the disease from those communities. So some countries have been able to do this successfully, like you mentioned, like Togo.
Yeah.
Nigeria is a very large country, though, as we all know. So it will take a lot more time and effort to be able to achieve this in Nigeria. Yeah. There's a lot of progress going on. As you may know, that elephantiasis or lymphatic filariasis is one of the WHO designated neglected tropical diseases.
Yeah.
And these are diseases of the poorest of the poor that usually occur in places where there is, lack of access to basic social amenities. There's challenges with clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. So we find that elephantiasis, is more a disease of poverty, so to speak. But there's been a lot of effort in recent times to, detect and eradicate these neglected tropical diseases in the affected countries. So the mass drug administration, occurs in communities where elephantiasis has been identified and is ongoing, on a regular basis in Nigeria to be able to control and eliminate the disease.
Okay. I can imagine how difficult it will be for people living with this condition, because pictures that we have seen of people with elephantiasis is sometimes brings about societal stigma. And how can one live through this?
Yes, people with elephantiasis do suffer a lot of social ostracization and stigma, and they're unable to make ends meet because they are unable to support themselves economically. It may impair their ability to work or to get jobs, and this is extremely it's extremely devastating to people who suffer from this condition. And there are a lot of, like, the WHO has programs to promote care and alleviate the suffering of people who are affected by elephantiasis. And there are a lot of programs now that try to ensure that at least they have some form of job opportunity to sustain themselves. But of course, there may still be people who may not be able to be reached by such programs, and such people may actually, suffer a great deal, just like other neglected tropical diseases like leprosy and onchocerciasis, and there are quite a number of them that have similar, who suffer from similar social stigma.
Doctor, have there been cases where both legs are affected by this elephantiasis? Have there been cases like that?
It's unlikely, it's unusual. Typically, elephantiasis is a unilateral has a unilateral presentation where you have both legs swollen. You tend to want to think of other possibilities like podoconiosis or Milroy's disease, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
But typically with lymphatic filariasis, it's often a unilateral leg swelling, or only one leg or the scrotum is affected.
Well, Doc, before we go, your final word and your advices to our listeners across the sub-region.
Finally, I would just like to say that in Africa, we have a long way to go to combat some of these neglected tropical diseases like elephantiasis or lymphatic filariasis. And the public health, programs that are, tackling these diseases need a lot of assistance and, government support so that we can be rid of such diseases. It's possible in our lifetime to witness the elimination or eradication of such diseases. And we also want people, if they have a unilateral or single leg swelling, to report to the hospital as soon as possible so that, they can be treated before it becomes before the disease progresses too much and, result in severe disability and dysfunction. So we just want everyone to be aware that such diseases exist and also cater to vector control, meaning trying to reduce the burden of mosquitoes in their immediate environment by ensuring that there's no stagnant water left lying about and keeping the environment clean as much as is possible and as much as is up to them. These are some of the things that can prevent, the spread of vector-borne diseases like lymphatic filariasis and also malaria. So we want as much as possible for everyone to play their role in eliminating and eradicating such diseases, the individuals, the communities, the public health authorities, and the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Folakemi Koladefe, for talking to us.
Thank you for inviting me.
That was Dr. Fumilayo Koladefe, consultant dermatologist and venerologist at Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, Lagos, Nigeria. If you're just joining us, this is Well Buddy, and we are coming to you from West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. If you're in Ghana, you're listening to us on Royals FM, 104.7 Wenchi, Radio Pod, 95.1 FM Savannah region. In Liberia, we are on Alternative Youth Radio, 98.9 FM Lufo County, and in Nigeria, you can listen more to us on Albaraka Radio, 97.5 FM Bauchi. We have been talking about lymphatic filariasis, which is also known as elephantiasis. And some health news. Burkina Faso health authorities, in collaboration with UNICEF and WHO, began a 4-day national polio vaccination campaign on Friday. The primary objective of this campaign is to provide immunization to approximately 4.6 million children under the age of 5, including those residing in hard-to-reach areas affected by armed conflict, as confirmed by official sources. UNICEF stated that in order to ensure adequate vaccine supply, they transported 5.3 million doses of polio vaccine to Burkina Faso, and it assisted the Ministry of Health in distributing the vaccine across the country. With the assistance of WHO, a team of 22,940 mobile vaccinators will navigate the 13 regions of Burkina Faso to administer oral polio drops, safeguarding children from poliomyelitis. Meanwhile, in Ghana, the health authorities are set to launch HIV self-testing program at the Accra Metropolitan Assembly on July 19. The program, on the theme Test Yourself, Know Your Status, is coordinated by the National Planning Committee in partnership with the Ministry of Health. This seeks to make it easier and more convenient for people to get tested for HIV. Already, some countries in sub-Saharan Africa, including South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini, Nigeria, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and Cameroon, among others, have rolled out HIV-ST initiatives. HIV self-testing is one of the newest innovations in a range of strategies aimed at encouraging persons to know their HIV status. And that's it on this edition of Well Buddy. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our resource persons as well as my colleagues for their contributions. We also thank our listeners in Ghana on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Radio Pod 95.1 FM Savannah region. In Liberia, we thank our listeners on Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lufo County, and in Nigeria on Al Baraka Radio 97.5 FM Bauchi. For your feedback on the program, please do send us an email to wadr@wadr.org. See you next time, and please do stay safe. I am Emo Edit. Bye for now.